Good evening, friends of YouTube, all over the place, all over the world. This is Jeff with Astroscoop and my latest live stream astrology podcast talk sort of thing. So this is Astroscoop, which is deep dive astrology coaching. And lately my weekly live streams have been right now, which is 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, New York time, and sometimes it's Saturdays at the same time at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So either Fridays or Saturdays here on YouTube. And you can also follow me on Twitter or X, which is Astro_Scoop. I'm also on Instagram, which is Astroscoop7. My videos are mainly here. My posts are mostly on X, and then I do a couple shorts here and there and posts on Instagram. So thank you so much for joining me, friends, and I hope you catch the replay at some point in the future for this. This will be my last Gemini live stream video because we're going to be entering the last period of Gemini before we get to the Gemini Cancer cusp. So today is June 7th, 2024. And if you caught my live stream last week, you'll know that up until around the 10th, we are in the Gemini 2 period. So for this weekend, we're finishing up the second decade of Gemini, which is a Mercury and Venus influence for the natives. And then we're coming into tonight's talk, which is Gemini 3. And Gemini 3 people are Mercury people, of course, because Mercury rules Gemini, but they're also co-ruled by Uranus or Uranus. I'm often fascinated by how half and half, when you hear people and astrologers mention that planet, half people say Uranus, which I think is correct, but I say Uranus. I've always said Uranus ever since I got into astrology. So I'm not sure. So comment. I'm very curious. I know that's really minuscule, but I'm really curious about how you pronounce it with the Uranus or Uranus with the sharper sort of talk. So leave a comment if you can. So first and foremost, I want to thank anyone that's been viewing my videos lately. And I noted in the last 4 or 5 weeks that Russia was giving me the most views on 2 or 3 or 4 particular videos, which was very interesting to me. And another interesting thing on that is I'm an incredibly microscopic YouTube creator, right, compared to most people. However, I'm getting to the point where I'm looking back at some of my older videos and feeling like, wow, that was a while ago. That was old. So it's really interesting that some of the videos that I did in the past that I may not care for now, I might not have liked my performance or the style of it, doesn't mean that that video is not worthy of attention, which is great, especially to other countries. Some of my older videos are doing well, and some of the newer videos are not doing well, and they're performing poorly. So again, it's a new template and paradigm with YouTube each week. So we're just going to keep at it. We're going to keep moving forward. We're going to keep growing, no matter how slow. As long as we're growing, it's a good thing. And that's a good analogy for the weather, because look at how in full spring is now. Spring is so vibrant and full. And now here on the East Coast, I'm looking at the West, which I do every week. And now the sunset is going to be closer to 8:30. It's around 8:23. So it's amazing. It's just amazing, beautiful thing. And I said it last week, it actually looks like it could be, 3 or 4 in the afternoon, maybe like a month ago. So that's a beautiful thing. So keep that in mind when we're talking about Gemini tonight. Keep in mind the time of year, the vibe that's going on. It's getting to be that pre-summer vibe now that we're past Memorial Day. People are starting to feel it. I notice people are starting to drive crazy on the roads and a little faster than normal. So the summer vibrations are coming, and you can feel the later pieces of Gemini eventually that will be coming into Cancer. So I said, welcome, please comment, ask a question, or maybe receive a mini reading or astrology example. So I'm not sure if anyone's here, but if anyone comes in, feel free to make a comment, ask a question, or even give me an example if you know of your astrology chart or someone else's, especially if it has to do with Geminis born this week. But it could also be any Gemini, since we're on a Gemini streak right now with my videos and my live stream. Oh, Carolyn says hello. Hello, Carolyn. Welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And I think someone else was coming, but I think a couple other people said that this is a little early for them on a Friday, so they catch the replay at around 9, which is great. So please share with family, friends. This live stream's growing extremely slowly, and it's really hard to market myself. So any word of mouth would be wonderful. Having a little allergy thing going on today. I'm noticing. All right. All right. So we're about 7 minutes in. I was just going to wait. I think what I'll do is I'll wait a little bit and give, if anyone comes in late or anything. But before we start, I just want to shout out this piece of art right here. A shout out to my daughter. I forgot to mention her art from last week or the week before. This is her Gemini twins. She drew that naturally. She didn't use a template. She drew that naturally. She doesn't consider herself an artist, but I think I do. So my daughter did that. And then the shout out to my daughter doing this for this week. She asked me, she said, Dad, what do you want for Gemini this time? We already did the glyph and we did the twins, which is the symbol. So I said, how about something with air, the element of air? And she's like, well, I don't want to just do a squiggly line that looks like air. So she came up with this little like cloud air thing. She doesn't like it that much, but she was tired, so she just finished that for me. So shout out to my daughter, my Virgo daughter, who has a good attention to detail, probably more than Dad does. So, or at least on some things. But I really appreciate her help. So, all right, so let's start. We are, as I mentioned, today's the 7th. So this weekend's the 8th and 9th. So on Monday, the 10th and 11th, we going right into the late Gemini period, with which most Western astrologers follow. Not necessarily Indian or Vedic, but, the zodiac cycle, if you will. So tonight we're in Gemini 3, and we're talking about Gemini 3, and all Geminis ruled by Mercury, obviously, but it meets up with Uranus or Uranus. Again, comment, please put in the comments if do you pronounce it Uranus, softer way, or do you do it the sharper way? Soft is Uranus, sharper is Uranus. I'm not sure, but I do Uranus. That's what I've always done ever since I was young and got into astrology. So as you can see here, June 11th to the 18th or 19th is the very last period of Gemini. And then, of course, here in this hemisphere, I believe it's on June 20th in the evening, we will enter summer, the summer solstice, which is beautiful, beautiful, warm energy. And we will enter the sign of the crab of Cancer. So we have about 12 days left of Gemini, and then Gemini going into the Gemini Cancer cusp, and then into Cancer. So probably next week will probably be one more, some talk about Gemini. Not sure which video that'll be, which talk about the video. And then the following week will probably be Cancer. So for all you Cancerian people, all you crabs, happy birthday. Your birthdays are coming up, and your time for your solar return is coming up. So Gemini 3 people are risk takers. So this is true of any Gemini period to some extent, but a lot of astrologers agree. And I was reading a really, really good article today that was talking about the Uranus co-ruler, and the Uranus influence on Gemini 3s this week really produce a risk-taking person. Now, it doesn't mean they're going to jump off a bridge, that sort of thing, or be a race car driver, Formula One race car driver, but they are going to take risks in their personal life, definitely their love life, and maybe even with schemes and plans and financially, because Gemini 3 plus Mercury and Uranus equals adventure. So these Geminis love adventure. So even a quiet, introverted Gemini born this week, I would look to their Mercury to see how they speak and how they express themselves. But there will be a sense of adventure in their thinking, and just their general presence will be youthful and adventurous for the most part. And Geminis are one of those signs that are frequently youthful during different periods of their life, where they make it look younger or act younger or seem younger. And depending on the rising sign, and of course your own physical DNA and whether you smoke, drink, or sun damage, that kind of thing. But as far as the physical countenance, Geminis often look bird-like, and usually kind of like light features or bird-like, and are often very youthful. And that really goes for Sun in Gemini, all periods, and then of course Gemini rising people, which Carolyn mentioned at some point that she has. So, Gemini rising people, there will always be something youthful about you as well. And if your Gemini rising happened to be in this decade, so if it was like the last decade post 20 degrees, if it was close between 20 and 30 or closer to Cancer, it would have a Mercury and Uranus kind of take to it. So that would be interesting. You'd have to look at your Uranus as well for a little fine tuning. So the risk taker leads to adventure, and this leads to an outlook on life that's sort of similar, I would say, to a young adult. So maybe, someone in the thick of college or coming right out of college, but a young adult that's starting to explore life away from their parents, and maybe away from some friendships that were solidified when they were younger, like in middle school or early high school, and now that they're branching out with a more young adult, youthful, exploratory attitude. So that's very, very typical of Geminis born this week. And when I was looking up the celebrities for Geminis this week, when I was looking at their faces, I noticed that they look quite different to like the Gemini ones that would be born in the very, very late part of May into early June. And of course, you have to take in a lot of factors like the ascendant, and then planets near the ascendant affect physical appearance, etc. But Gemini 1s, Gemini 2s, and I was looking at the Gemini 3 faces, and they just look so different to me. And I'm not sure why. They do look Gemini, but they don't look as twin-like to me, or as purely youthful to me. So maybe that was just they look a little more rugged, maybe. A little more rugged's the word, than earlier Geminis. But look up, when I mention the celebs, you might want to look up some pictures, because you get an interesting feel by by just studying the picture and looking at their face. So Gemini 3 people need to strike out. And I don't mean baseball. I mean, they need to strike out on their own and carve a niche for themselves. And, you know, all the air signs, obviously, Gemini, Aquarius, and Libra, all have a need to circulate. I guess that's the word. You know, spread themselves out, circulate, depending on which planet your air sign resides in, whether it's rising, and then your rulers, your air sign houses in your natal chart. That can also help produce some airy expression or airy energy. But these people need to strike out on their own, and they are probers, like testers. I mentioned last week, and I think the week before too, that Gemini is a let's look around the corner kind of sign. So if you're traveling with a Gemini person, he or she is going to most likely be like, what's over there? What's over here? And of course, you got to look to the Mercury and your rising. And if you have other air signs in your chart and you're a Gemini, that's just going to add to the curiosity and the ability to spread yourself socially, or want to spread yourself socially. So they're probers and testers. So not necessarily teachers. You know, a Gemini is not necessarily a guru per se. That doesn't mean they can't teach people things or people can't learn from Geminis. I've mentioned that all the Gemini decanates are all incredibly talented. There is a natural, organic kind of talent to Gemini energy that's amazing. When you look at some people in history with the writing and language and singing and words, Geminis are off the chart in terms of talent. It's unmistakable. But they're not really teachers, and I don't really see them as leaders either. So it's a mutable sign, and then it's in the Uranus decadent, which is an Aquarius influence. So I don't really see Geminis born this week as leaders or teachers. So they might not necessarily be in positions where they are leading a team or supervising people at their work or vocation, or even in a club. They're probably going to want to stand out for their ideas, and they're going to want to stand out for their opinions, but they're going to sort of shuffle themselves in the group and yet have their own, probably most likely their own space to move, because they're not teaching and they're not leading, so to speak. So they can be very insightful because they're probing. And, you know, Geminis are probing in a different way than, like, say, a Scorpio's probing. So if you know someone that has a lot of Scorpio in their chart, or if you have a Sun in Scorpio or a Mercury in Scorpio, there's a clear, intense emotional probing that goes on, and mental probing with Scorpio. With Gemini, it's not necessarily, it's air, it's mutable. So it's more restless, curious, and more childlike almost. Like, oh, let me see what this is. Let me come in and zoom in and then zoom back out. So it's more childlike. It's not as intense. It's not as emotional. And so if a Gemini 3 person finds you interesting as a friend or a lover or a companion or whatever, you should feel like you must be like glowing or something, because they're full of spark. So if they're noticing that in you, that's good, because that means you have a spark like them. So they're very insightful with others, and that's also because of the Uranus Aquarius influence. Good insight into people would make very good any sales or marketing, anything where they have to constantly be around people and adapt day to day. No problem for people born this week for the most part. If their Mercury was in Taurus, which it could be, if you're a Gemini, your Mercury can be in Taurus, you will be a little more grounded mentally and a little more fixed or stubborn with your mentality. But that's generally good. That would be good for sales or business, that combo with the Gemini and the Taurus. But it wouldn't be, your curiosity would be slowed down a little bit, as opposed to if you had, double Gemini or something. So the insight into others, they use their wit and charm to please others. And that's natural, obviously, for all the air signs, but especially for Gemini. But Geminis know what they're doing, I think. Geminis can do it because it's fun, but they can also do it and charm you because they want something, or they want to manipulate the situation. So, I've mentioned this about all the Gemini periods. It's important to have friends or family around you that keep you honest. Now, because Gemini is a dual sign, doesn't mean that all Gemini people are, tricksters and dishonest. That does not mean that. But the nature of the late Gemini to be witty and insightful like that, it's very easy for them to want to play around with the environment and the situation. So manipulation is a possibility. So you try to stay honest, use your wit and charm naturally. And these folks go beyond the physical. They obviously they have physical needs like every sign does, every human does, but they are strongly mental, and the thought process is very strong in them. And then that Uranus, Gemini 2, as I mentioned, are innovative because they are right in the middle thick of Gemini, and they're also influenced by Venus. So they can be good in music or fashion, that kind of thing. But with the Uranus here, or Uranus, you have, there's more of almost like a metaphysical leaning, maybe. I could see Gemini 3s this week being into metaphysics, or any late kind of Gemini planet that's closer to Cancer. I could see that. And beyond the physical, and they attain and probe heights. So they are probing people, they're testing people, they're testing the environment all the time. They're testing the antenna. Their antennae are testing everyone else's antenna. And that's got to be hard to turn off sometimes. And I mentioned that about all the Gemini periods, about their motor to slow it down or turn it down. So they're going beyond the physical, attain, probe heights, and heights of all sorts. This could be literature, it could be music, it could be just writing, or novel, or you're writing copy for a magazine or something. That would go really, really well with the Mercury and Uranus person here, definitely. So the Aquarius influence is warm and friendly, can quickly turn cool, and then can be cold even. Gemini is like a dial, I think. A Gemini planet, and I'm not bashing Gemini. I know, all signs and planets have pluses and minuses, and it's all how we use our energy and how we process our emotions and our thoughts and everything. But Gemini, almost all the time when I see Gemini planets, there's like a dial of interest, I call it. And it's like shoot, 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 shoot. It's constantly vacillating of interest. And I don't really think it's personal. I would love to hear more from Gemini people, or people that have major Gemini in their chart. But there's definitely, with the Aquarius influence, there's an interest that can turn cold. It doesn't mean they're becoming a cold person towards you. It just means that they're turned off to the lack of stimulation of whatever is going on in that relationship, or that study, or that book, or whatever. It's just not stimulating. So, and then they can go from the cold right back to kind of thoughtful, kind of neutral and thoughtful. So they can go through all these, I think, periods with the Aquarius co-ruler and the Mercury there. So the positive is they're congenial and warm and friendly, but it can quickly turn volatile if they feel pent up, trapped, stressed. This would probably be another Decan that does not like to be trapped or settle down too easy in a career, work, or relationship, or even a marriage. So they can be very impatient. Again, coming back to that kind of young adult attitude, very impatient to get on with life and kind of chomps at the bit. And that's chomps at the bit is kind of like some of that's kind of like raw Aquarius energy that's kind of brilliant and genius. If an Aquarius energy person, early Aquarius, is brilliant and has natural genius, of course they're chomping at the bit because things are so easy for them, or too easy, right? So you need that challenge. You're like, oh, I read this novel that was 500 pages. That was nothing. Now I'm going to read this Bible, that's 1,000 pages, or that's harder. So that's similar here with the Gemini, with the Aquarius influence, is that volatility and that impatience with life and people sometimes where they can chomp at the bit, so to speak. So what's a lesson for Gemini, all Geminis, but especially this week, is grasp what is in front of you. And what I mean by that, and I use the word grasp purposefully, grasp, when you think of attachment, you think of maybe Cancer, which we're going to talk about in a couple weeks. We're going to talk about how Cancer attaches. But Gemini, late Gemini energy that's not quite on the cusp yet, is still strongly air energy. It's not really colored by the water energy at all yet, or the earth energy before it. So it's strong air energy, and it's not necessarily grasping anything or anyone, which can be a good thing. Detachment or non-attachment can be very positive in life and can be very clearing and cleaning for people. But Geminis this week it's like I picture them on an amazing vacation in an island like Belize or something, or Mexico, on a beautiful island, with butlers bringing you snacks and food and drinks. And you have this idyllic, sunset and beach or whatever, perfect temperature. Maybe it's not humid. And they're thinking about bigger horizons or more fun or riskier horizons. Like, well, what else can I do? Instead of grasping or being in the moment of what's in front of you. So I think that's really important for Geminis. A big Gemini lesson is to just grasp what is in front of you and to not be afraid to be a little attached to a person or to a routine or to your family a little more, or friends. You can you can teach people that you want to be close, but that you also want distance, and you want to be close and you want distance. And that's obviously a theme with air signs. That's very much an air theme. But gratefulness is really important. And I think, I feel like Gemini is one of those signs that if a Gemini is distracted or not paying attention to you or his or her work, or not giving enough attention to something, it's not necessarily because they're being cool or cold. It could be, if you turn them off somehow, it could be. But whether or not the person has attention issues in their life, ADD type of issues or not, if you have Gemini planets and you have ADD or ADHD, that's quite a challenge. But if you don't, and you're just thinking about a Gemini mentality, it's important to remember to just be grateful for what's in front of you, and to not always be thinking about what's next, what's around the corner, when's the sun going to set. You're not even enjoying the sunset, and you're thinking about when is the sunrise tomorrow. This is especially true for Gemini moons. I don't know what it is about Gemini moons. I'm not saying that in a positive or negative way. I'm just saying what I've observed from every single Gemini moon person that I've known. I've never seen it not work. Is this like they're looking at the sunset and they're already thinking about the sunrise tomorrow. So think, that's a little too fast for me. Like you should really just enjoy. Life goes fast enough, I think, At least in my view, it does. As I'm getting older, I'm noticing life, the perception of life, how fast a week goes in between the live streams. And, you know, it's pretty amazing. But yeah, it's a very important for Geminis, especially this week, to kind of take a look, probe what's in front of you fully first before you move on to other horizons. And that's also something kind of true with all the mutable signs. So it's, to be fair to Gemini, it's not just Gemini. You know, you got Sag, you got Pisces, you got Virgo, all do that in a similar way because of the mutability and the changeability that a mutable sign, that mode that they're in. All right, we're about halfway through. Not sure if there's anyone else here besides Carolyn. I think there is. One or two other people were coming. I know someone else just left and someone came before. I was hoping for another comment. All right, I guess not. All right. So after thinking about lessons for Gemini, you know, I pretty much talk about this each week, that it's really good to incorporate the opposite of the period or sign that we're talking about. And the opposite here is Sagittarius 3, which is pre-winter. So that's very interesting. So that's actually still, so if you're, let's say you are a Sagittarius person born on December 12th. So June 12th is next week. December 12th is exactly the polar opposite 6 months from now, from next week. That would still be a fall person, even though it basically feels like winter. But that person would be coming up on the cusp. But the Sagittarius 3 person, the fire energy is more powerful and more direct, and it can teach the Gemini 3 person to be a little less cool, maybe a little less warmer, and also engage in a little more passion, sort of thing. Not that Geminis don't have passion when they're interested in something or someone, they do, but the passion can wax and wane quickly, I think. You know, so that's where you incorporate the opposite, which is your fire sign there. Air and fire, fire and air. So on this opposite axis of Gemini and Sag, you have kind of an argumentative kind of bent, because late Gemini or late Sag is well into those mutable signs, and they are adventurous signs, and they are often argumentative in the sense that they are standing up for their own space and freedom very much. Oh, Karen Karst. Hi, Karen. She says, hi, Jeff. I'm a Gemini. Yes, I forgot. I totally forgot that you were in the last decan. Thank you for reminding me about that. I'm glad that you got to hear the Gemini 2 deck, and I hope I wasn't too hard on Gemini 2s, but thank you. I appreciate it. So the opposite energy there with the fire and with the air and fire is argumentative and can create stress. So I think when you're looking in terms of compatibility, and I might try to do some live streams in the future, maybe even shorter, that are just compatibility, because it doesn't seem like I just have enough time to incorporate all my ideas here into videos or live streams. There's only so much time in 7 days, right? So it's important, I think, for a late Gemini or even a late Sag to have people around them that are a little slower and a little softer, maybe a little quieter, maybe not as adventurous. I know that might sound boring to a Gemini or maybe even a Sagittarius person, but it's just like like shades, shades of adventure. Like we're all on a spectrum of how adventurous we are, or how extroverted we are, or introverted, with personality tests, like Myers-Briggs and all those other things. Jungian psychology. We're all like little dips. And a lot of that depends on our environment that we're in. If I was doing this live stream in front of 100 people live, I would be way more nervous. I mean, I'm even nervous just talking to the camera, and there's no one in my office, and there might only be 2 or 3 people watching. But so, yeah, there's definitely something there. But that's really important for Gemini, is to maybe be around people that maybe are a tad more boring than them, a tad slower, a tad softer, just to take some of those edges of Gemini off a little bit. Gemini can be edgy, especially with the Uranus or Uranus influence. So that comes into expectations. You know, a Gemini that's always looking around the corner and probing and testing and curious. Oh my gosh, oh, I got to check this out. And what about this class? And, you know, and that even goes for people that aren't Gemini, but that have Mercury in Gemini, which is the Mercury, the communication planet. So if someone's a Taurus and they have Mercury in Gemini, or someone's a Cancer, as we'll talk about in a couple weeks, and they have Mercury in Gemini. So they're not a Gemini person, but they could have Gemini for their Mercury. I know a Cancer woman who has Mercury in Gemini, and she is incredibly curious. Her mind never stops, and yet she's not a Gemini. So that's kind of interesting. But the managed expectations can be too much. That goes about yourself and what maybe drive and wanting to succeed, and using all that restless, strong air energy to want to succeed. I would imagine if a Gemini 3 or even Gemini 2 person was the first child, if they were the firstborn, and you take that psychology coming into it, I could imagine that person being very, very mentally ambitious and maybe wanting to read voraciously, or be a writer, or even, you know, go into the medical field where you produce journals on, you know, long dissertations about, you know, vitamins or something. You know, I could see that with Gemini. So expectations, which could be too much. So you want to manage that, and you want to manage your laser. So Geminis are sharp. There's a laser there. Geminis can actually be quiet and sweet. You can see that in a lot of Gemini songwriters in music, you know, with Bob Dylan and Jewel and Prince, of course. I mention Prince every time, right? How can I not mention Prince, the artist formerly known as? But if you, Brian McKnight is an R&B pop. He has a song called One Last Cry, which is a big hit from the 90s. If you listen to all those Gemini songwriters, they all have a quiet, sweet side. So Geminis get a bad rap for being abrasive sometimes, but Geminis can be very sweet and quiet when they're feeling secure. And when they put that into writing or poetry or a song, it's beautiful. It really, really is. Like I said, the Gemini talent, I'm envious of Gemini talent. It's unmistakable. It really is. So you want to manage your laser, and you're into details. Now you share that with Virgo. You know, when we get to Virgo in the fall, we're going to talk about Virgo, late summer. And, you know, Virgo is all about details. Gemini's into details in a different sort of way. As a Gemini, you don't always need it to be practical, where Virgo almost always wants every little detail practical and useful. But you like gathering that information, and you like those details. And it's flying. I can't read my own writing. Flying to greener pastures because of those details. So that's something that I think Geminis have to be careful of if you want any sort of consistency or stability in life with relationships, marriages, or work, is manage that, you know, no matter how good something is going on in your life, especially Gemini's born this week with the Uranus influence. It's like greener pastures, like, ooh, what's over there? What's over that fence? Is that grass a little greener, a little more interesting? It's, you know, again, it's not necessarily that your needs are not met, you know, in your life. It just, again, it's that curiosity sort of thing. So that's also good to sort of manage. All right, so we got into the lessons there with Gemini 3, and it's interesting because I when I watch a lot of astrology videos from other astrologers, I notice that a lot of astrologers don't talk about the decanates And I keep saying how important I think these really are, because you can see from week to week the kind of minute differences, whereas one person can say, I feel more like a Gemini from what I've read, and then another person could say, I don't really feel like a Gemini. If you're June 19th coming up, you're going to be like a 28 or 29 degree Gemini. You're almost a moon child. You're almost Cancer. So of course that person's not going to feel probably like a pure Gemini, especially if they have like water in their chart or earth or something, something a little softer or a little slower. So they won't feel necessarily that full impact of the Gemini planet. So let's talk about celebs. There's never a shortage for incredibly talented Gemini celebrities. Amazing. And here's one physically. We lost Chick Corea. He died recently. He was an amazing jazz fusion kind of guy, keyboards, piano, composing. He did all sorts of different groups and worked with all sorts of consummate musicians. If you look him up, he was a very odd kind of looking guy, and very mercurial to me, and rugged. Definitely kind of rugged in a almost a youth sort of way, like a child sort of way. But he was amazing, and his music's very deep for a Gemini. It's detached, but it's very deep. Very, very interesting. Stellan Skarsgård, he's a great Swedish actor. He's very underrated, in my opinion. Incredibly intelligent, mercurial actor that's done a lot of dramas. He does mostly drama or mystery that he's done 80s, 90s, early 2000s. And he's a great actor. Ali Sheedy from the Brat Pack in the 80s and 90s. She was from the epic movie Breakfast Club. And Ali's interesting. She was also in a show called Psych years ago on USA. And she's really a really good example of a Gemini actress who's kind of moody and dark, and then kind of happy and bright and bubbly, like most Geminis can be. But she's kind of like either or in every scene. She's not consistently one. So she plays that really well. And this is controversial. I know I had to mention Donald Trump. However people feel about him, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on in the world right now. But I had to mention him because he's a crazy, whether you like him or not, or you don't, or you feel nothing towards him, he was and is a crazy person. And I don't mean certified crazy, like lock him up, which he may be, but I mean he's exemplifies the exploratory and risk-taking nature of a Gemini 3. He never shies away from a confrontation or a deal or a risk. He could care less. I think he likes playing all the people against each other, and he's not worried about his own life or death threats or anything. So I don't know. But all these weird players in politics, he's definitely a true Gemini. That's all I'll say about him. But Ice Cube, it's another very, very talented but kind of aggressive, acerbic rapper. The reason I put him on this list is Ice Cube is one of the few rappers in the hip-hop industry that doesn't go along with the crowd of Hollywood. And he says he doesn't join the club of all the negative stuff in Hollywood. And he likes to be free from that. So I respect that. So anybody that's famous that can try to get out of that and be a person that has some values, Geminis can get very swept up, I think, in the glamour of Hollywood and the fun and the excitement. And I think a Gemini could get swept up with that very easily, even if they're a good person. But he fights against it. So that's interesting. Tupac Shakur, the late rapper, another rapper who fought against the establishment in a sort of, revolutionary sort of way with his lyrics and his rapping. Very, very mercurial, highly intelligent. And he said a lot of controversial stuff about people that he probably wasn't supposed to say. So, that's the Gemini tongue is interesting. Gino Vanelli, he's a 70s soft rock, Italian-Canadian singer, kind of yacht, people call it yacht rock or dad rock. It's smooth stuff. He does that really, really nice. If you want to go to bed at night and just put Gino Vanelli on, very smooth. Greg Kinnear, I love Greg Kinnear. My mom and I used to watch him on, what was it, Talk Soup. We used to watch him on Talk Soup. I believe it was in the 2000s, or no, it must have been 90s, maybe late 90s, early 2000s. We used to watch him before he got big. He was just like a small character actor and comedian, but he's great. Greg Kinnear can be a real jerk, good jerk and villain. He's very, very intelligent, and he uses his charm in his roles well. What was that? I think he's in that movie As Good as It Gets with Jack Nicholson. He's very underrated. In the beginning, I think people didn't really think much of him, but he's solid. Thomas Hayden Church, another underrated Gemini comedian and actor. He's from a movie called Sideways. He was from a series called Wings in the 90s, which is a big comedy sitcom kind of thing, drama set out of Massachusetts. And he was very, very good in that, and very kind of boyish and youthful, and added a good wit to the more serious characters. Alison Moyet she's one of my favorite British singers. If you get a chance, go on YouTube and put in Alison Moyet, All Cried Out, and listen to her belt. That's another thing Gemini can do. Gemini can belt. That's the force of Gemini. Beautiful. Just belt. So, and she's also really smooth and suave too. So she belts it, but then she's cool. So warm and cool. That's Gemini. You're warm, you're cool, you're warm, you're cool. Dean Martin, absolute character from the Rat Pack, and obviously was involved with Frank Sinatra. And interestingly enough, Dean and Frank Sinatra's charts are very polarized. So Dean was a Gemini and Frank was a Sag. So it's interesting that they had that sort of dynamic of being opposite signs. Richard Strauss, German composer, definitely very Germanic, and probably one of the more serious Geminis on here. So I didn't look at his chart in depth, but I would guess there's some heavier or more serious influences in his chart, in addition to being a Gemini 3. But I think you can still hear a Gemini influence in his composing. Brad Delp is probably one of the best rock singers in all of music ever. He was in a group called Boston, and he's passed now. He's been passed, I think, for 2 or 3 decades. But he had a song called More Than a Feeling, which is it's in movies and TV. It's in sporting events. And the notes he hits in that are just unbelievable. Another belter. He can sing really quiet, and then he can belt it. Marcus Miller, probably one of the best bass guitarists on the planet. Unbelievably smooth and versatile. And his style is very, 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 very fast and handsy. Great bass. Boy George, the character from Britain, from Culture Club from the 80s. Needless to say, he's an incredibly interesting, charming, talented singer and musician. Ann Wilson, I think I mentioned her in another live stream because Heart is touring again, the Heart Sisters. And Ann Wilson, oh my gosh, even a better singer than Alison Moyet. Talk about being able to belt. What is it with Geminis and being able to belt their thoughts out? Yeah, it's really, really interesting. So maybe in a personal relationship, a Gemini wouldn't know how to express that or want to, but in a music or a writing sort of format, they can just belt it and let it go. So she's amazing. Larry Dunn, he's one of the co-founders of Earth, Wind, and Fire. Wonderful keyboard work. Really, really good musician. James Belushi, who's the brother of the late troubled John Belushi, who I think was the less troubled in that family of those brothers. But Jim Belushi, he's another underrated actor you don't hear people talk about. He's done some wonderful roles. He did a movie called, what was it? I think it was called Canine, with a dog in the 80s, where he's a cop and he has his dog and he goes through all these trials and tribulations with the dog and everything. And he's really silly, but he's also serious and emotional. And he also did another movie which he has depth called The Principal, which is really, really good, old school kind of gritty movie called The Principal. So very underrated. And that's another thing with Geminis. You know, Gemini people are so versatile that people can underestimate you. And if you're in a craft, or you're a singer songwriter, or you're an actor or actress, they pinpoint you as, well, you're this silly, you know, witty person in this comedy or whatever. But Geminis have range, you know, and that might be an easier way for Geminis to express their emotions, because they have range in something else other than maybe a one-on-one, you know, relationship. So James Belushi, awesome. Yeats, you know, awesome poet, kind of visionary, prodigious amount of work, obviously. And Paul McCartney, what's to say about him? Unbelievable songwriter. I like Paul McCartney's solo work and the Wings group that he formed much better than the Beatles. I thought his stuff with the Beatles, I just think it's overhyped or overrated. Although he's a wonderful songwriter, but a little bit overhyped in my opinion with the Beatles stuff. But undoubtedly a mercurial person. And Lamont Dozier, he's a more esoteric or obscure sort of producer songwriter. He did a lot of stuff behind the scenes with Motown and the Supremes, and specifically he really got Diana Ross all fired up for stardom. So he was a good conduit for Diana Ross as an Aries. He was the kind of thought process before she got big with her Aries persona and her dynamic personality. So he's a really good unknown kind of songwriter, but kind of quiet person. So there's so many amazing Gemini celebrities to give examples for. And, you know, every time I look up celebrities for each sign and for each period, there's always tons. There's enough famous people, both living and past, that you can find that represent, you know, astrologically represent the energies for the period. But especially with Aquarius and Gemini, and I know we did Aquarius in the winter, Aquarius and Gemini, the amount of talent when I look people up is unbelievable. Now, sure, there's plenty of talent across all signs because people have complex charts, different rising signs, and you put all that together. But Geminis, you have to use that Mercury. Like it's your gift, the gift of thinking, the gift of wit, and also the gift of like rational reasoning. There's a lot to be said for being cool, you know, to not get too hot-headed and to be cool and rational and reason things through with some of the signs that are a little more hot-headed or passionate or more emotional, not seeing things clearly. So Gemini, especially Gemini 3, can serve a good role with people with that Mercury and Uranus influence. So I just want to take a quick look at, let's see here. I want to take a quick look at the solar system here, the transits for tonight. I know I don't have, maybe I'll get another chart or a stand or something so I could have you look at the chart each week. I'm going to look into that. But we just had the new moon in Gemini. So tonight, which is Saturday, now it's approaching 8 p.m. Eastern Standard, we're at 6 degrees of Cancer. But we just had the sun and moon in Gemini conjunct around 16 to 17 degrees, which is not the Gemini 3. That would be more Gemini 2 energy. So a lot of Mercury and a lot of Venus energy. And then Venus is also in Gemini. So this is a really, really good time for love and for just general fun, I think, for all Gemini planets. And if you have Gemini rising, Those planets are falling in your 12th or first house. And if they're falling in your first house, they're going to fire your personality up. And that can be a good thing, depending on what else it hits in your chart. Mercury is also in Gemini. So talk about curiosity right now. Oh, Gemini people must be like, Geminis and Gemini risings and Mercury and Gemini people must be like, your head must be exploding right now with curiosity. I don't see how it couldn't be. And that would also be true of Aquarius and Libra too, because you could be getting the trine. Jupiter is now moving into Gemini. It's at 3. So now we only have one planet now left in Taurus, which is the outer planet Uranus, or Uranus for Taurus. So we're really, really low now on the Earth. So the air signs should be feeling a good breath of fresh air, and things shouldn't be feeling as heavy right now because the early Geminis are getting a trine from Pluto. The only thing is mid Geminis are getting a square from Saturn. So Saturn's at 19 of Pisces. So if you're, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 degrees of Gemini, you're getting a square from Saturn. So that can create some tension. But overall, with the lack of heaviness with the earth signs, I think the air signs in Gemini in particular, the Gemini planet should be feeling good. And that should help your health too. It should help health, vitality, energy, all of that. And especially if Pluto trines any early Gemini, if someone has a Gemini planet that's between the cusp and like 5 or 6 degrees of Gemini, that's really good for Pluto there. And like I said, not much fire going on. We got Mars in Aries, not much Earth. And for the water, very, very little water. We have the outer planets in Pisces still. And I think I'm going to do a live stream on the Saturn cycles, because that's a really, really important thing for a lot of times when people ask for, they want their chart done, or they want to know the cosmic cycles, or what's going to happen. Am I going to meet somebody? Am I going to do this? And people do their tarot deck, or they, however they do it, whatever tools they use. It's that's an important thing. And the water signs, because of the outer planets, it's affecting more generational rather than in a personal way. But if your Saturn, if the Saturn right now in Pisces is on a major planet, if you have a Pisces planet and it's around that 19-degree mark, then that's kind of heavy because it's hitting it, it's conjuncting it. So that's going to make it serious. And so that would be first Pisces sun people if they're around 18 or 19, and of course the Gemini people that I mentioned, that's a square. But again, mostly for the air sign, it's mostly good energy here. And with a Sagittarius ascendant tonight, so any babies born in the next hour or so, they will have Sag rising with all that restless Gemini. Whoa, that'll be a seeking person, always seeking something. So pretty cool. But I will look into doing a Saturn if you want. Oh, can you comment on the picture? This picture. Thank you. Oh, this picture. Oh yeah, I don't know if you were here. This my daughter drew this last week. This one, the Gemini, the glyph. The twins, and she did the symbol before that. But my daughter, I have to shout her out for this one today because I wanted air, and she said, yes, okay, yeah. She wanted, and I said, I didn't want just like a squiggle, like an air, piece of air. I wanted something with a cloud, so she did that for me, even though she was super tired, super tired this morning, but she did that for me. So thank you very much to my Virgo daughter for doing that. And she's a wonderful girl. She recently had a comment from a teacher that said she's one of the most polite kids in her grade. And I said to her, are you really, you're probably just saying, are you just saying that? I said, really? And she said, yes. So There's a little bit of Virgo politeness going a long way, which is great. So yeah, so my daughter did that. So that's just air and a cloud there, just to kind of talk about the splash of Gemini, so to speak. But I think we'll feel that in the next week, we'll start to feel that Gemini energy get a little less airy and flighty. And you'll start to feel that kind of warmer, more emotional feel as we get to Cancer. And you can feel that with the sun. You can feel that with the sunset. You know, for the next, 10, 12 days, we're still gaining light, but then we're going to go to Cancer, at least in this hemisphere. And then we're going to start to approximately lose about 1 minute of light each day, you know, right around there. So you could feel that difference. So that's always an interesting thing. When we get into July, at least I feel it. And I'm sure Cancer people feel it, or even a Cancer planet. So we'll leave it at that. We're right at an hour. Yay. I didn't go over an hour. I don't want to lose my voice tonight. So thank you so much to Carolyn and Karen, who are loyal chatters here and loyal viewers. I really appreciate it. Again, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. My live streams are here on YouTube weekly. Right now, they've been Fridays. They used to be Saturdays, but I do switch them every now and then. I know last week it was Saturday, but it's usually 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is Astroscoop 3801. Again, follow me on X, Astroscoop, Astro_scoop, and Instagram, which is Astroscoop7. So thank you so much for all the views and everything. I really appreciate it, and the growth. And stay safe, and I'll see you all next week.